Hey everyone, it's Mr. Drake. We have been talking about the media, and if you're one of my students, we've already been talking quite a bit about campaigns and elections. What we're going to look at today is how the media covers not only campaigns, but also the political landscape in the United States in general. So over the course of this video, what we're going to go over is the presence of media bias in the United States and talk about what role it truly plays and whether it really exists to the extent that some people believe it exists. We'll talk about what kinds of political news stories there are out there and how those different types of stories might play into what media outlets decide to do. We'll talk a little bit about the concept of an adversarial press and tying into that the leakiness of the government, the tendency of government officials to leak information to the media. And we'll also talk about the recent rise of sensationalism or pumping up stories intended to attract listeners or viewers or readers in the American media. Now, we'll start by looking a little bit at what the media actually covers and how they cover it. There is a long-standing conventional wisdom in the United States that the media has a liberal bias, and this is something that has persisted consistently in the United States mindset for the last 40 or 50 years among a lot of people who pay attention to politics. But that maybe isn't the whole story. Polls do show that journalists tend to be more liberal than the public at large, but that doesn't really guarantee that the stories themselves that are put out there by the media will be biased. And a lot of how much bias goes into a story may depend on what kind of story it actually is. Routine stories are the most common thing that are put into the news, and that's just basic stories about here's what happened. Okay, this bill got passed into law. The president signed this bill. There was a terrorist attack at an embassy in this country. That kind of thing. Feature stories and insider stories are where you're going to have more bias and more interpretation by the reporter and by the editors who decide what actually gets published. Feature stories are events that aren't routinely covered. The information is out there and easily accessible to anyone who wants to go find it, but it's not something that every single news outlet is going to cover. I'll give you an example. In 2010, 2011, over the last few years, NBC News has investigated this heiress named Huguette Clark, who died fairly recently at the age of 104, 105. But there was a big controversy regarding what was going to happen to her multi-million-dollar estate when she died, and she was this really reclusive figure who hadn't been seen in public in 50 years or something like that. And again, this is nothing salacious. It wasn't anything that was a government secret. All the information was out there, but NBC News, and one particular reporter at NBC News, decided to go actually investigate this particular story. Now, that's not a political story, but it is an example of a feature story. It's a story that one outlet decided to cover and the editors decided to publish it. Insider stories. This is where reporters get knowledge that is not commonly available to the public. This is if a reporter has a government source or is sent information that is supposed to be kept secret or is just not generally available to reporters or to the public, and the reporter decides to use it as a source and then report on it. Feature and insider stories are more likely to contain biases because reporters can choose what to report on and what not to report on, and then editors of TV shows, news magazines, that kind of thing, can decide what they actually want to run. So, is there bias out there? Yes, but usually you're not going to see it in regular news stories. You're much more likely to see it in stories that are a little more offbeat, such as feature stories and insider stories. One very big trend in American media coverage of the government in the last 50 years or so is the rise of what we call the adversarial press. The root word, of course, there is adversary, or people who are opposing each other. A lot of politicians view the media as the enemy and vice versa. The media because of competition among different news outlets, will try to be the first to break a particular story that will, really turn the heat up on a public official or embarrass them or sort of shake things up. As a result, you end up getting a public that doesn't trust the government or the media. The public's already fairly cynical and mistrusting in terms of its views toward the government, but this perception that the media is just out to get politicians sometimes also is going to lead to more mistrust of the media by the public as well. The picture there is of Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward. Some of you may know who they are. They are the two reporters from the Washington Post in the early 1970s who broke and were very persistent on the Watergate scandal, the break into the Watergate Hotel, and the subsequent cover up by the Nixon administration. They are considered sort of the godfathers, as it were, of the adversarial press and investigative reporting, and sort of, a lot of, how to say this, a lot of reporters nowadays sort of look up to Woodward and Bernstein as models for how they should conduct investigations and sort of a goal to aspire to, as it were. One thing that helped Woodward and Bernstein break the Watergate story wide open was the use of a leak. Leaks are bits of information that come from highly placed sources to reporters, and those leaks or that information is then used in articles or stories. You have a lot of competing branches of the government that really don't get along with each other. You also have a lot of freedom of the press in the United States, which results in our government being incredibly leaky, possibly the leakiest democratic government in the world. Great Britain, for example, has a law in place that was passed in the late 1800s called the Official Secrets Act, which says that, there's a lot of different things that cannot be released to the media under pain of, punishment, imprisonment, as it were. But the United States doesn't really have that type of restriction in place on leaks going out. You'll see various viewpoints on this tendency to leak information depending on how you view the media or how you view the government. One side would say the government can't keep anything secret, and how are they to be trusted and all of that. The counterpoint would be the people have a right to know what the government's doing, and leaks are a big part of revealing all of that. Reporters often rely on these inside sources to gain information for a story. Reporters network all the time and meet all kinds of people through the course of just regular investigations, and they can then call on those people later to try to get information on something going on in the government, and then they can use that information either on the record where they directly quote the person, or they can use that information on background, which is basically where you say, okay, a source inside the government told me this, and that. And the motives to leak stories from the people who do the leaking vary, but the reporters probably don't care. They just want the information. But some leakers do it because they're whistleblowers and genuinely are concerned by what the government's doing. Or maybe they have an axe to grind with somebody in the government and see leaking information as a way to sort of exact revenge on someone. The most famous insider source or leak in history came in the Watergate scandal. W. Mark Felt, known for many, many years because of the 1974 book and 1976 film All the President's Men as Deep Throat, who's a good friend of Bob Woodward. They had met several years before the Watergate scandal began, but Mark Felt rose to the level of deputy director of the FBI and began giving information to Woodward on deep background, which meant that it couldn't even be quoted as an anonymous source. He just kind of pointed Woodward in the right direction, and because he was on deep background, he got the nickname Deep Throat, and that's kind of where that came from. And it wasn't revealed until 2005, the actual identity of Mark Felt, who, again, deputy director of the FBI. Many people believe that he decided to leak information because he was angry about not being made director of the FBI by Richard Nixon in the early 1970s, when he could have gotten that particular promotion. There are many examples of famous leakers of information out there, but again, Deep Throat probably the most notable Finally, another important aspect of the modern American media, and something else that has made a lot of people mistrustful of the media, is the tendency towards sensationalism. There used to just be, your local newspapers, a few national newspapers like USA Today and the Wall Street Journal, and then you had your three networks that provided news. Now there's all kinds of TV news, the cable news networks. There's all kinds of print media out there, magazines, newspapers, all of that. And then you've got the internet, and numerous, countless amounts of political blogs and websites. As a result, you see all of these different outlets sort of jockeying for consumers, trying to get more readers, trying to get more viewers, that kind of thing. And as a result, they're going to publish stories that are more sensational or salacious than they would have in the past when there wasn't as much competition. A big example of this would be sex scandals. There have been plenty of presidents over the years that had tendencies to stray outside their marriages, to put it nicely. In the 20th century alone, Warren Harding, Franklin Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, all those presidents had extramarital affairs, but no news outlet reported on it because it was considered taboo or in extremely poor taste. Well, fast forward to 1998, it comes out that Bill Clinton, who had been rumored to have many, many affairs over the years while he was the governor of Arkansas, turns out he had an affair with a White House intern named Monica Lewinsky, and he admitted to it, and the story absolutely blew up. And, whoever could publish the most sordid details of the Clinton-Lewinsky affair or scandal got the most viewers and made more money. So, it really was beneficial to these news outlets to publish some pretty seedy stuff. You'll also see press conference gaffes get blown up in the news. Gaffes, of course, are instances where a politician has a sound bite that, whether it's in context or not, makes them sound incredibly stupid or, bad in some way. You'll also see embarrassing photo ops put out there to try to embarrass a candidate or to, again, gain viewers or gain readers. Gerald Ford famously fell down the steps getting off Air Force One back in the 1970s, and that picture was everywhere. So this is another part of the adversarial press, and a seed or a source of mistrust between the government and the media, that the government always believes the media is out to get them. That will do it for today. As always, be sure to ask me if you have any questions, and make sure you're keeping up with all your readings and things for class. Cheers!